first episode of STEM Education Lighthouse series on collaborating across disciplines. I'm Adam Kulaas, your host, and we're going to be exploring career and technical education, basic education, industry partnership with project-based experiences that enhance STEM and the arts. In this first episode, we've assembled a dynamic crew of physics, CTE engineering, and industry. And while we're excited to dive in to the marriage and the fusion of the work, I'd start with a whip-around introduction that lets our listening audience know who you are and how you arrived at where you are and what you do. So, Mr. Devine, we'll start with you.
Sure. It's hard to know how far back to go. I'll go back to 10th grade year to explain how I got to where I was. I think in 10th grade year, we studied the Epic of Gilgamesh, which, to summarize, is about this guy that tries to find immortal life, but instead goes on these epic quests and impacts a lot of people, touches their lives. He never finds the immortal life, but because of all the good deeds he did, we're still talking about him thousands of years later. So I think that really guided me towards education, where instead of working exclusively in industry, studying physics, and trying to work in a lab to make a difference, I could instead try to inspire generations upon generations of people to do that work as well, and ripples on the pond spread outwards with that impact. I have been teaching for about 17 years now. I started at Tacoma School of the Arts, spent about 8 years at the Science and Math Institute, and have been at IDEA, current school, for about 5 years. And done a lot in that time: physics, geology, astronomy, biology, engineering, all kinds of stuff.
Excellent. Welcome. Mr. Hansen?
My name is Blake. I teach at Blake Hansen. I teach at IDEA. I've been teaching there now for 6 years. I've always really loved making and building and designing with as many tools as I can, but I've always known that I wanted to really be focusing on experiences over products. But I had a really great professor in college that ran a really awesome shop that exposed a lot of students to making in all sorts of ways, from welding to woodworking to a number of different projects through the lens of sculpture. And when I left that experience, I knew that I wanted to help bring that to a lot of other people too, because of how empowering and amazing that experience was. But I also knew I had to spend a lot of time gaining the skills I needed in order to make that relevant and interesting. So I started a furniture business and made my own furniture for residential and commercial clients in Tacoma, and worked a while in New Orleans as well. And then more recently started teaching boat building at the Center for Wooden Boats in Seattle, which has also always been a passion of mine, and always kind of looking for a place where I could have access to more students and create more experiences using a better and more sort of stable shop situation. And then found myself at IDEA, and now I get to teach freshmen, 4 freshman classes a term, and then alternate my advanced classes between furniture design and boat building, using all things from hand tools to CNC routers and computer design and stuff like that. So that's where I am now.
That's great. And finally, Mr. Balmer.
So my name is Jason Balmer. I'm an application engineer with ANSYS. We're a global company that does engineering simulation design. My background, actually, a little bit of a non-traditional path, also influenced by a professor in college, but I was more liberal arts minded at the time until I took an astronomy class and could not believe, how interesting this topic could be, and that I was taking a physics course without a requirement for mathematics. One thing led to another. I switched into the physics department. I ended up becoming an engineer with a physics background, worked for Boeing, and got really excited about a career field that I really didn't know was an option for me when I was younger. And I ended up at IDEA, working with Johnny and Blake when the school came about, really is a big interest to, hey, if some of these students are maybe like-minded, where maybe they don't really know what they want to do, like I was in high school, maybe I have an opportunity to come in and help, put a little context on what engineers do and how it could be exciting. And that's how I sort of, was invited into the school. And it's been an absolute blast, and I'm looking forward to telling some of those stories as we go through this.
Yeah, that's great. I think, it's exciting. As the director of Career and Tech Ed for Tacoma Public Schools, it's a fun highlight in terms of how we've assembled this group, but also how we arrive at bringing individuals from industry in to better support our students and community in terms of the experience we provide. So, the future of education is a fun topic, and I think oftentimes it really is geared towards and leaning towards this personalization for each student, meeting them where they're at and supporting them in their kind of evolution of who they are, not only as a learner, but as a person. And I think the future of everything is hinged on design. It's designed, integration of design or application of design in terms of solving not only local problems, but global. That's the heart of kind of our conversation today. And so to help me and everyone else kind of better understand, I'd love to dive into a lane of the three of you kind of unpacking how design fuels the different courses you teach and through this really cool partnership and collaboration that gives an exciting experience for our learners. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I can jump in. I think there's a lot of different ways you can approach like the individualized nature for students. Just to name drop a few things, like Wigan and McTie's backwards design, really similar to like the DeFore model that people might use in professional learning communities, where you first identify what you want students to know and do, right? That's ground one. We've got standards that we teach to in CTE or Common Core, next generation science standards. And then the next step, of course, is how do you know that students have met that standard that you want? So thinking about your kind of projects and assessments after you've identified what you want them to do. And then the kind of key, last part is like, what if they do accomplish that, and what if they don't? So your enrichments and your interventions. And I think that's where you really have the opportunity for the personalized approach to education for each student. For me personally, engineering is kind of like the application of math and science to solve skills. So even though I'm a basic education teacher, and at the core of me, I'm a physics teacher, I'm always approaching it through the lens of physics, like where are you going to use these skills? So creating projects for students to engage with that, with multiple opportunities for enrichment and intervention if they're not quite getting there. One of the things that we use at IDEA quite often is Stanford's engineering design process, where 5 steps: they empathize about the problem, then they define it, then they start their ideation, they go into prototyping, and they test it. I kind of use those 5 steps for whatever project I'm approaching. Just a lot of thoughts there about that.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone wants to riff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am students' first experience with design and engineering at IDEA. I take all the freshman students in and try to get them as hooked and interested and fully started on that process as quickly as possible. So I'm going to try to get them using advanced tools in design and building really quickly, and try to get them really through all those stages of the design process in as small of loops as possible to sort of create enough inertia and excitement in each student, which is all definitely going in slightly different directions all the time. And there's so many different entry points into that design cycle, whether you're inspired by something that you see that already exists that you want to redesign, or you have this idea, you're not sure it's going to work at all, and you want to try to test that out through the design cycle as well. And there's also so many different entry points into the skills and the standards that we present, where a student may really not think of themselves as skilled or talented or have any potential in a certain area, which makes it really difficult to start in that area, whether it's computers or whether it's working with tools or whether it's math, science, or writing. But they may feel that they do have this connection point or this entry point in something else through something they learned in school earlier, or a good experience they've had, or a hobby they have, or a mentor they have. And so creating as many loops and as many entry points as possible is sort of my job as I bring in students to IDEA, to get them showing up, know they kind of are interested in this mechanical thing they were exposed to at one point, but they really don't see themselves as someone that can jump on a computer and design something that then goes to a robot to create. That's like super foreign, and foreign for everybody, but some for others more. And so bring in lots of entry points for students to be able to enter that design cycle and approach those standards that we do want them to meet by the end of their class or year or whatever. So
I think one thing I really like about that too is, it can look a little chaotic if you walk into the classroom and you don't know exactly how the teacher's approaching it, but giving those kids all those different like entry points takes a lot of management from the teacher's aspect, but it's really great for the differentiation because if you're having a product, every student is doing this activity this day, and then you try to differentiate and give that kid that one different thing, there's a lot of social stigma behind that. Whereas with the projects and all the different entry points, like we've been saying, students can be working on something that's appropriate for their skill level and it doesn't stick out so much to their peers. And I feel that really helps get students over the hump with the engagement.
Yeah, and it's fun for me as I get to travel through different schools. It's like intentional chaos to some extent, and it's a celebration, right? And so it's neat to walk through the different labs and watch this integration or application of things that they learned in different courses in different physical scenarios, and it's this really cool cycle. Icing on the cake or the cherry on top is this intentional fusion with industry. And so, Jason, if you want to kind of unpack just your work with these guys and the partner schools, I think it's really exciting.
So I'm learning a lot from these guys about, it's one thing for me professionally to go out and let's say train customers who are using our software, to design all these products, that we use today, whether it's rockets or cell phones or whatever it might be. They're professionals. They know they need it. They need it to to do design, and they have a job. They have metrics. They have deadlines. Training is very different than teaching. I think students who maybe don't even really know what they want to get into yet. I mean, when I poll all of my students right now, they're all over the map. So I feel like a big part of what I can do is kind of unpack some of that with some real life examples, right? So they don't know that, let's say in a former life when I'm sitting at a desk at Boeing and you look at my computer screen and you see a box and you see some circles and you come back the next week and you see the box has changed shape and the circles have moved around. You might not know from the outside that what we're doing is analyzing, lightning distribution on the 787 that we're working on so I can get smart about how to help the test team save money doing a very expensive test, making sure that we come up with the right, perturbations on things. That's a lot to really unpack with just, a very quick presentation as a guy who comes in from industry. Being in there in the classroom with them and maybe presenting something like that to, it might be intimidating at first, but to let them know it's okay if it's hard, if you're interested in this. You've got a calculus teacher across the aisle. We can talk about integral equations, right? So making it approachable, and maybe the students don't know what they don't know. You don't even know what to ask in some of these very complex things. So learning how to teach design without me, maybe knowing it, back when I'm working as an engineer, I'm not thinking necessarily day to day of the design process. My task has been given to me. I'm part of a team, but now I get to think of it in a larger context and I get to present it that way. And I think there's a lot of benefit, and you can see it generates a lot of excitement. So,
yeah, going off of that, I think the most exhausting, challenging, and taxing part of teaching for me is how many decisions you have to make every day, whether it's about like a certain behavior being okay or not, or whether it's about like a certain direction to go with a project. And oftentimes teaching, you don't really get to collaborate with as many people as you might picture you would. You usually are making all those decisions by yourself in a room full of 30, 14-year-olds that you definitely don't want to consult on certain things. So, finding ways to make that student engagement that you want to do happen, you oftentimes don't know exactly which angle or what direction to go and what's normal and what's standard in industry. And so having Jason upstairs for the couple of years that he was able to work, in our building, a lot of the stuff I'm teaching is just like breathing to him. It's very straightforward, very straightforward design processes. And then we got into some interesting stuff too. But it's so cool to be able to sort of, the thing I was getting into at that point was designing with curved surface and flattening surfaces, and then doing some simulation with those. And it made it so much easier for me as an educator to be able to go back and talk to him about the different entry points and the different ways that could go, and really get advice on like how this is normally done. It was a really huge opportunity that I wouldn't have gotten if I hadn't been able to work with someone with so much experience in that area. So yeah.
You guys, and I've seen it evident in your work and what you provide kids, and I think the exciting part is it's not just the three of you in this dynamic, but it's the bigger community that is IDEA. You bring this really cool element of STEM, but hyper focused and very transparent in the art balance. I'd love to hear sort of that integration beyond like the science of design, and how you integrate this artistic component that really capitalizes on each kid's sort of passion. And I'd love to hear from an industry standpoint, like how that kind of evolves or transcends into career pathways and things like that.
You want to take a crack?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was excited just about 2 weeks ago, I get a LinkedIn message from one of our former students at IDEA. And it was basically a thank you. Hey, the class that we took at IDEA, I didn't realize how, I'm paraphrasing, how connected that was to what I'm doing. I'm a student at Cal Poly. I'm a junior, and I just wanted to say thank you. And within 24 hours, I sent that response around within my company, and he's working as an ANSYS ambassador. I didn't even know we had a program where he's socializing about finite element analysis with his colleagues, with professors, and he's getting introduced to a network. It's not so much my company as much as our customers. That is probably somebody who's going to be employing him one day. And what an opening there. And so, anything like that, more things like that, bringing some of our customers, whether they're coming from the space side, to get in and talk to the class and show how, look, that's relevant for what we're doing today. This assignment, an example of designing for lightning protection. I mean, that's happening all over the place. If you can get somebody from industry to come and reinforce that, that's even better. So, we're not there yet, but we're looking for more ways of doing that, and I get pretty excited about those types of opportunities.
I think I can think of a specific example with the STEM kind of integrating with more of the artistic design aspects, and that would be one of our former teachers at IDEA, Hanyan Shu. She did a great job of collaborating with a lot of diverse staff, and her background was with the career and tech education. This past January at IDEA, we do like a J-term class where students take one focus course for a month at a time. And the idea there is always to try to get two teachers to pair together that are from different disciplines. And what her and I ended up doing was something with mobile sculptures. I had students on my aspect of it really explore a lot of the science behind how they work in terms of forces and balance and weight. And then they fabricated those mobiles out of steel in our shop that we have there. I guided students through that process. And each of those tools is another teachable moment for a really important physics concept: heat, friction, thermodynamics, material properties. You can just tick off a lot of NGSS standards there. But instead of just making something out of steel that's kind of slapped together, working with Ms. Shu, we really explored, history of Calder and the societal impacts, and she ran them through just these multiple rounds of iteration with design and charrettes and like really evolving their ideas through a number of different mediums before they got to the steel. And that wouldn't have been a skill that I had that I could have guided students through. And with her being able to do that, like what I was expecting as a final product for the students was way, way, way above. That wouldn't have happened without that partnership, cross collaboration.
Yeah, also working with Ms. Shu, we designed and built a cafe and a gallery wall at IDEA. Just so many moments where you have a whole class of students looking at a problem and just saying like, this is how I think it should look, and this is how it is, and this is what we can change, and really getting everyone engaged in those projects is just so easy when you have those opportunities and have that expertise around to be able to make happen, because that's what students are really hungry for and really want to do. And I think those mini-term collaborations are probably the best example of those when we have our January term. I taught another one with our computer science teacher doing slip casting with clay and three-dimensional shapes and molds from that. And it was another instance where we're bringing art into the design and making space. So,
Yeah. Her background is in architecture, right? Industry comes
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah.
And that design, she's really beautified a lot of the spaces around our school. You had the gallery wall in the hallway, and then she collaborated with me and my students to make this 1,200 LED interactive panel that's going to go across from that. And yeah, it's just great to see like bringing all those skills together, the woodworking, the design aspect, the modeling it in her computers, my students doing all the wiring and programming for the LEDs. Just really engages them, especially when there's that clear public product at the end. Key part of project-based learning.
No, I think the reason I teach is because when you have the ability to manipulate the world around you, it changes the way that you look at the world around you. And the most concrete examples of those has been our school, the projects at our school where we're trying to remake a space. And at the end, there's no way that a student's not going to believe that they can remake a space or a larger setting around them through collaboration when that's what you really actually get to do. So, yeah, that was the best instance of that.
It kind of goes both ways too, because learning about that, depending on the industry that an engineer is in, aesthetics necessarily aren't right there in the forefront, right? So, it's nice to be able to have that that reminder that you can actually teach engineering by putting these extra layers of constraints that are only there for the aesthetics aspect of things, or maybe some other things that from a functional standpoint that wasn't necessarily important, but you're going to have to incorporate that, right? Changing cases on computers to make them look better is going to be a heat issue, but if that's a much better move for the product, then we have to work with that. So it's really helpful to have that. Coming back to the industry side of things as well.
Yeah. I think just in full transparency in terms of keeping it real, interdisciplinary design is really hard. And so I think it'd be fun to just kind of dive in for a second. And you guys have worked extremely hard to arrive at where you're at with this momentum and this sort of fuel to say, yes, we want more because of some of the outcomes that you've arrived at for kids. What are some tips in terms of how that starts? Like what's a clean starting place? And then your next level, and you're also integrating industry for that affirmation and validation of design in terms of the experience that you're giving kids. But what are some, let's unpack some hardships in terms of just getting intentional with how you are crossing different contents and being really intentional with it.
I don't know if this answers the question, but I think it's where it leads me. If you're having a hard time coming up with something new and novel and exciting, which is sort of the authentic experience that every student and every teacher is looking for, the best way to find that is just by combining two things and seeing what comes from those two. And when you get to do that at our school with collaborating with other teachers during mini-term, that is just a clear way to end up with a product that is going to be new, backed up by your own experience and your own interests and those of your colleagues, and it's going to be interesting. It's going to be authentic when you get to make those connections, and teaching can often be hard to do that with, but finding structures and systems to collaborate with the amazing between students, between the ideas that students have when they're designing something, and between teachers and between colleagues is having those connections. You're always going to end up with something that is both authentic and new, and that's where students are going to buy in and be interested. So.
Yeah, I follow their lead on that. I didn't know when I got my first job as an engineer that I ultimately sort of was dabbling in what's called systems engineering because of that multidiscipline. You can get degrees in systems engineering. So I was not a systems engineer, but you would have to sort of operate as one and look at all the different things that are going to have to come into play on a design. And there is a way to teach that in class. I'm like a supporting role right now. If you look at using things like finite element software and mission design, we can call that model-based systems engineering. So I can provide the students, access to this big sandbox of tools where if Johnny and Blake come up with some concept that, hey, one aspect might get in the way of another one, we can actually put a prototype together and test that. And that's a completely, that's a field in its own right that is really taking off, which is just beautiful to be able to sync that together. Here's some interdisciplinary, ideas that we have. There's kind of a pathway here from a practical engineering standpoint. And by the way, it also might be a career field for you. So that makes it really fun.
Yeah. I'll just add that, yeah, cross-disciplinary, getting that to work with other people in a practical sense, I think it's no big surprise. It just takes time. I think that's a big part of it, and I think that our school's done a good job of allowing us to have that space. Because you need to build a relationship with the teacher, just like we need to build relationships with students before we can start to, get them to care about how much we know. They have to know how much we care, as we said. And then, like us, example, we've talked a lot about things that weren't related to the engineering class we were going on about. And just before this started, we were already brainstorming ideas for a new project with an AM radio receiver and finding the ways that your ANSYS software could model that, new additions that I didn't know about. And yeah, I'm excited to see where we go with that. Even though we're not like right next to each other at ID anymore, I think we're going to find an opportunity to do something really cool with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So J-term and mini-term have come up a couple times, and I think just to unpack it for anyone who engages in this series, I think it's super important. And it's like, in terms of my 20 plus years of highlights, all of Tacoma's partner schools, so there's IDEA, Sammy, and Soda, all participate. And so as I traveled through, even just this last January, it was so exciting to see students from different schools collaboratively engaging on these projects. But could you guys unpack that, just what it is a little bit, because it's not new and it just continues to get better and better and better, just as an example to put out there into the world.
Yeah, I think it's something that we picked up because a lot of colleges do something very similar, and it's just a chance to really focus on maybe going only like an inch wide but a mile deep versus a lot of the other time where you've got pressure concerns to get through the list of standards in your semester. You end up actually going a mile wide but only an inch deep. So it's a chance to do that deep dive. I mentioned previously, like, it's not a single teacher teaching, it's always two teachers collaborating with a big emphasis and push to have those teachers be cross-disciplinary, to find some juxtaposition of their ideas that maybe they didn't even know existed until they got in the same room and started sharing some ideas. We've also used that time to do some things that would also be very difficult to fit into a traditional teaching year, which is our service and study tours. So actually doing some travel with students, having them go to remote locations and do some learning or service opportunities in those countries like Nepal. We've had some local ones to the national parks, really exciting stuff like that. And a big focus during that time with having one group of students for the entire class day for 3 to 4 weeks, doing stuff that's project based. So that's hard to fit into a normal teaching schedule, especially if you're on 50-minute periods. It's a little bit easier if you got block schedule and got maybe 90 minutes or more, but trying to set up materials and transition and perhaps have a different class come into that space is always going to disrupt the ability for students to do something that they're able to fail on and then retry and reiterate. And mini-term allows that time to happen.
Yeah, obviously the main story is getting to collaborate with another teacher and come up with some amazing new content and grow as a professional in a very short period of time is the main story with mini-term. But also just practically, I'm always trying to fit in building and making in a shop space into a 90-minute period, which is longer than most people get, but that is so difficult. Putting away stuff and getting out stuff and learning new things takes up so much time that you're not really able to dive in to the point where a student can feel confident about what they're doing. It really takes that whole period well designed in order to be able to do that. And at mini-term, you get to watch so many students gain that confidence and that proficiency that makes them feel like they can do something new and pursue a new passion. And that's really great to see.
Yeah, I think it's fun as someone who's an insider but outsider to see that true delivery of like show what you know. And so there's product attached to or the outcomes of those, not only in mini-term or J-term, but holistically. And I think that's another exciting element of this project-based push, and this standard integration, right? So as a CTE director, when I look at frameworks, and they're pretty expansive in terms of what they cover, there's this fun entry point in terms of multiple lanes within all of our different career and tech ed courses. So as we start to sort of wrap this first episode, I think I'd love to have each of you sort of give some advice to anyone who engages in this series. Give some advice around like where to start. I think that's in education in any experience that I had as a teacher. I think that was always the first barrier to kind of dismantle because it's hard, right? And so what are some tips and tricks in terms of just getting started around this idea of collaboration, around this idea of interdisciplinary? And so, yeah, I mean, if we could usher out this first episode with some of that, I'd love to hear just thoughts from each of you.
A few things that pop into mind for me are I think it's easier to collaborate with staff that are in your school already. So basic ed, don't be afraid to make the leap over to CTE, and you're going to be right next to those people. But kind of the holy grail is making a partnership with something that's outside the school industry, ANSYS, for example. Practical advice for that is lean on your students, get to know them. You should be getting to know them anyways. What do the parents do? That's led to a lot of really cool opportunities for me. Where we're at, we've got a lot of aerospace industry. So I did a lesson on, in my AP physics class that was about putting a lander on Mars. And with that, I got to actually bring in way more than I expected. Some Boeing engineers and some engineers from Blue Origin that came in, critiqued the students' kind of final products and gave feedback. That was great for the students because they saw not just a teacher that they don't really know if I know what I'm talking about in terms of how that's applicable, but people that just came from doing it yesterday and giving them feedback. So lean on the families, get to know what they do and use those. That'd be a practical piece of advice.
That's great.
If we're like you mean sort of like entry points into collaboration with other teachers?
Yeah, I think in different systems, like yours is, your site is pretty innovative in
Right.
terms of really doubling down on creating those access points. Not that it doesn't come with work on teachers' parts, but I think in some of our traditional models that are pretty expansive in terms of size and traditional schedules that have been mentioned here on this one, what are some starting points to dive into that interdisciplinary? How can we cross connect?
Yeah, it's and at our school it's kind of hard to picture not just wanting as much possible collaboration time as possible. Every teacher's day is structured very heavily in terms of the amount of time you need to be spending delivering a certain thing at a certain period. But planning time is really precious. But those are the times when I get to sort of not only reinvigorate my knowledge about what I'm interested in teaching, which has obvious connections with everyone that I work with, but reinvigorating your excitement for what you're teaching, because that's going to create the authentic experience that students are going to latch onto. And so that takes some curating over time. I've only been doing it for 6 years, but I still know that it really it takes effort to build in that time to stay excited about what you're teaching so that your students can feed off that too. And being able to do that with my coworkers and with Jason in industry and stuff has made that not just better, but even possible to bring that to school every day. So, yeah.
Johnny's right. You find out who the parents are, start having conversations, go meet for coffee. You have no choice but to start by socializing. We're out there, right? Meaning like us, I've got a day job. I'm an engineer. How can I make the time to do this? It's because I feel like I have to. When I've got colleagues that don't really realize that I'm out teaching a class, and they get super excited when they find out what I'm doing. So just like I have to maybe make some things that you say seem trivial, and they're not. I have to make that manageable and approachable for a teacher. A teacher has to make it approachable for us in industry, right? How is it that I can come in and help? And if you don't know how schools operate and what your classroom looks like, my ideas of what I thought would be a great teaching moment would, I find out that I have to recalibrate. So you have to. So I think a lot of us are out there, but we don't exactly know how to enter. Without having this introduction, serendipity through, meeting Zach and meeting you guys, and you have to have those conversations, and just I think things can really get organic when you come across the right people in industry. And yeah, I truly believe that we're out there. So you just got to start having the conversation.
I think one last practical tip I
Please.
would add too that's a different take on it is any professional organizations that you might be involved with. I've had a lot of good partnerships kind of come out of that. Been part of the Association for Experiential Education and Washington Science Teachers and American Association of Physics Teachers. And that last one, they had a grant that caught my eye, and it was actually pairing, it's called the PAIR grant, pairing high school teachers with college professors so that you could collaborate and create something together, get resources, and making sure that that high school curriculum is preparing them for the college level. And that was a great collaboration that I had. I got my students a whole lot of microcontrollers and circuitry kits about 10 years ago, and that wasn't really something that was out there in a lot of classes. And a great opportunity for me. We got to go present what we had done at the conference that following year.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal way to conclude this first episode in terms of just this word connection, right? And so, Jason, I think you presented a really cool angle in that you are out there, like our parents are out there and eager to engage, and so in multiple industries. And so I applaud it, I appreciate it. I think that as we continue this series and unpack, our next episode's September 28th, where we'll continue to unpack this idea of what it truly looks like to collaborate across discipline. So with that, I appreciate the learning and excited that all of you are here. Tune in on September 28th. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks.